All right, we are on live. I hope everything is working. Apologize for the technical difficulties, everybody.
Yeah, it was my fault. It was
Okay,
the Roadcaster.
yeah, let's blame it on the Roadcaster, right? We're gonna get a gentle phone call from Roadcaster. So welcome to Stop the FOMO. We're on the live stream today. We have an exciting agenda planned, and a lot of this has been inspired by Whisper Status, Brian. Actually, both topics were. My gosh, you're on fire, Brian.
I got you.
So, uh, I'd like to address a couple of things, and we're going to hit the possibility TV shortages. Now, it's still early. Now, technically, a lot of these TVs haven't quote unquote launched yet, but they should be in inventory, right, Brian? That's what we're seeing from the Sonys and the Samsungs. Some of them are shipping and whatnot, and a lot of people are deciding whether or not to get the Samsung QN90A. Some of the early reviews are out. They're all 55 inches, though. I noticed the 65 inches were not released yet. A lot of disappointment by various reviewers online, or rather, YouTube reviewers are disappointed. Written reviews appear to be excited, so we can talk about the differences. And you and I, we talk about that a lot. I know it.
Absolutely.
And then I want to hit. Let's start with the kind of like the thumbnail, what we talked about, which is Best Buy laying off so many of their salespeople. And before I jump in, and I simply forgot, I'd like to introduce our viewers to our guests today, Whisper Status, Brian, and joentell Joe. So Whisper Status has his own channel. Unfortunately, since I redid this link all over again, the video description does not have it now, but I will add it later. So check out Whisper Status 74 if you like to talk TV and gaming. And joentell is Mr. Hi-Fi Audio. I liked what Joe's been doing recently. He's putting up all these definitions of hi-fi terms, and I've been going in there, going through them. What are you on, volume 5 now, Joe?
Six of 7.
Nice.
So I was on there
So-
with Aaron from Aaron's Audio Corner. And you know what? Just to let you guys know, I'm not a TV guy. I have a projector here, so if you guys start talking about TVs, I'm just gonna be taking notes. You know what I mean? I need an
Well,
OLED for the bedroom, so I'll be sitting here just drinking my my yerba mate right here. So
Well, that's why you're here, Joe. I say you represent the common man who, hey, a TV looks good, it looks good, but you have no idea why. What's this HDR? What's this dimming zone business, right? So if we say something that's like, wait, what does that mean? Stop us so that it benefits everyone else who's watching who may not be caught up on that. So with our guests introduced, what we'd like to talk about, and I think this also is relevant to you, Joe, is how Best Buy recently has gone and laid off a whole lot of people, most of them salespeople, and all of them well compensated salespeople. We're talking salespeople that moved millions of dollars worth of inventory. And that's not the surprise, because a lot of people are saying, oh, wait a minute. Best Buy, it's brick and mortar. They're going south. This is at the heels of record earnings. And when you add that to the equation, it adds a whole new context. So here we have Best Buy making more money this past quarter than they've ever made, actually. And it's record profits thanks to the lockdown, people going on and buying a whole bunch of stuff. But then why lay off your sales team, right? You would think the sales team drove a lot of this revenue. And this is part of their move towards competing with Amazon and Costco because they're price matching. And I don't know if you guys have price match with Best Buy, but they're pretty aggressive. They even overlook the fact that some of the models technically aren't the same. Like you talked about that, Brian, where TV models at Costco suspiciously look identical to the TV model at Best Buy, but they're off by one number, or they add an extra letter. But it's literally
they
the
delineate
same.
it.
Right. But then I go to Best Buy, I go, hey, I see this Samsung or LG OLED, and they offer it for this much. They don't even try to tell me it's a different TV. They actually say, okay, look, what are they selling it for? Let me go online and check. Okay, done. We'll match it.
I've actually seen that on sound bars before too, where if you compare something from Costco and Best Buy, they have just one different thing, and it's like an extra button on the remote or something like random.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. And I think the fact that Best Buy understands that consumers aren't stupid, because in the past, a lot of consumers would just accept, oh yeah, it's not the same model. Okay, whatever. Okay, don't price match. But now Best Buy has, and I don't know if all Best Buys do this, but I do it over the phone, right? I'll live chat. I'll say, hey, this is what I found. Here's a link. immediately he'll match it. I've done it in person before as well. I have a salesperson at Magnolia who used to work there, and he would always price match Costco. So, but then recently, and I think to start off this conversation, I want to share with you the story that Techno Dad Chana D shared with me.
That
And
guy?
he couldn't be on today, but this story is the theme of why we're talking about Best Buy and on this channel. So Techno Dad was at a electronics show, like a PlayStation event. He was there with Joelster 4K, right, another YouTuber, and he stepped to go to the restroom, and there were two guys kind of eyeing Techno Dad. And so they approached.
Where's the story going, bro?
Well, they approached Joelster. They go, "Hey, is that Techno Dad, right?" Joelster, yeah. And what they ended up telling Joelster was, everything we know about TVs, we watch Techno Dad's YouTube channel. Then we turn around and tell the consumers, right? Any questions they have about the TV, we get it from YouTube, specifically Techno Dad's channel. And Joelster's like, what? What kind of training is this, right?
Yeah.
And this was years ago. It wasn't like yesterday.
Oh, gotcha.
So because this is the trend, meaning even the salespeople at Best Buy are actually looking to YouTube for information. How many in the public, consumers, go to YouTube first before they make their decision? Because if YouTube helps you make your decision, whatever it may be, OLED, QLED, speakers, DACs, by the time you get to Best Buy, your decision is made. So we talked about this sales funnel, right, Joe? Is where does it start? If the sales funnel starts at YouTube, then Best Buy doesn't need salespeople. You just need to find a place to buy it online. You might want to go to Best Buy to touch the TV, measure it, make sure it fits, but the sale is done. And let me know what you guys think. Here's my twist. What if Best Buy had a TV playing YouTube channels from FOMO, my channel, Techno Dad, Vincento, Quantum TV? It doesn't matter, right? Whisper
Dang,
Status.
name dropping all crazy over there.
Everyone is on a playlist rotation at Best Buy. Because the reality is those guys are already selling the TVs. You just create a playlist for the individual TVs or speakers or DACs or AVR that you're selling. So let's say you have a Denon AVR. You create a playlist of all the influencers on YouTube talking about this Denon. You just put on rotation. It's playing. Your job is done. So they could shop from product to product, watching the various YouTube playlists, right? They're watching them anyway.
That's a horrible experience, man.
I know but is that not what people are doing now? So you tell me. I think this is where we're going. I don't know.
Can I just step in real quick? So the reason I agreed to do this with you is because it kind of touched the hot button with me. Mm-hmm. So one of my first jobs ever was at Circuit City, right? Pretty much one of my first jobs, right? And I love that job because I got to play with technology and I got to use my people skills and talk to people about technology and, deal with people in tech. I mean, what's wrong with that, right? It's kind of what we do now. And at the time it was commission, right? Commission sales. And this was back in like 1999, right?
It sounds like my video.
Yeah, I was probably making about, I don't know. I remember during Christmas time, I was like, looked at the numbers. I was like, man, I'm making over like $22 an hour. Back then, my girlfriend's dad at the time also worked at Circuit City. And I was making more than him. So that was kind of cool. Kind of embarrassing, I guess, for him. Like, then he's making more than me. But anyway, my point being, around that time was a time where they changed from commission to, hourly.
Yeah.
And then what happened to Circuit City? Gone.
That was it. Gone.
Right?
Or the good guys. Remember them?
Good guys, right?
Yeah.
And it's because, like, as a salesperson, you kind of have to be somewhat informed. I mean, some of the other guys were not as informed, but I try to be as informed as possible, right? But when it became hourly, those guys didn't care at all, They had no incentive to know anything. So I'm just wondering if that's kind of the trend. I'm wondering if it's more of it sounds like just a business move where they understand that people are coming in with their mind already made up because they've done the research. And then when they get in, They just need the guy to go and like go get it from the back.
Well, so let's talk about that. Where do people start their research then? Because if people know that when they get to Best Buy, right? So let me put the Best Buy. When people know that they get to Best Buy, and Best Buy, there's no one there. It's almost like a Costco. No one's going to help you. Where do they start their research? Is it YouTube? Is it on forums?
Probably
Well,
a mixture of both. You know, I would say though, touching on what Joe just said, the video I did about Best Buy actually was word for word what Joe just said, which is why I'm glad he's here, because it was audio and visual. And those salesmen at Circuit City, The Wiz, Sounds Incredible, Tweeter were very knowledgeable. And they were installers as well. And as Joe just said, they made a good living and it was prideful. And going in there and talking to those guys, sometimes they made more money than the customer. So it was even basis for knowledge and respect. And as I'm sure Joe just said too, it was, you know, he was proud to have that job. His sales and then his commission reflected that. And then when, like to your point, Joe, when that was stripped away, as one of my best friends who worked at Circuit City, eventually the guy next to him made just as much money as just showing up. So my experiences in Best Buy lately is very surface-based knowledge. And unfortunately, they can only point you to whatever is current or whatever the inventory they're pushing. But my video that we talked about, Joe, it was like word for word what you said, was a company taking care of their people and then paying them accordingly. Unfortunately, we've gotten rid of that. They realize these things sell themselves, which is why Costco sells so many crystal dynamic TVs and all these really, they just go for the brand. And I just realized that, you know, your knowledge, Joe, especially being, I don't know how old you are, but being part of that time.
Is that old? Is that old or not old? I'm not sure.
I'm older than you, I think.
Oh, okay. I don't know. We both got some grace, but all right.
Yeah.
We're timeless.
But I remember a buddy of mine really, he had a clientele, like kind of like how cars, people would buy the same car from the same person. I'm sure you had that, Joe, where they'll come in and say, you know, especially audio back then, more than TVs, right? Joe, in Circuit City was more receivers, speakers.
Yeah,
You know.
actually, you know what? I sold computers. I was in the computer department.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And digital cameras when they were brand new. So I would sell so many digital cameras.
Yeah.
You know, so
Well, what you were saying though,
gonna
FOMO, is I think where people are starting is they just look up something online, 2021 TVs, and they just go from there and then reverse. But it doesn't start anymore at the store. And we talked about this with Best Buy not even having TCL, Hisense, Vizio represented. People are buying sight unseen now, and they don't need. They need us just to talk about it. And, you know, we talk about influencers. I'm not an influencer. I have a very small channel. But what I can do with my community is talk to them individually because my channel is still small. And then they go in and they tell the person what they want and they just grab it. So it's been interesting.
That is a really good segue, Brian, because I'm going to kind of switch over to a different format. Maybe this won't cover your face, my friend. Here you go. Better.
If you cover my face, all you need.
So this is a really good question because it segues into what Brian Whisper Status was saying, which is, well, people are buying Hisense and TCL, but they're not being promoted literally anywhere. Unless you go on Amazon, unless you watch something specifically sponsored by TCL or Hisense, and I'm going to talk about Hisense, even Hisense has nothing. And yet they sell out on Amazon every year. If you notice that, the H9G, within a month of its launch, you know, people put videos up. I'm not the only one that puts it up. And a month, 60 days later, it's sold out without one product placement anywhere other than people reviewing the TVs. And so this goes to what Jacob Marley is saying is, if I don't game at all, what features might I be overpaying for? What TV will be really good for just streaming TV and movies? And so Hisense and TCL is selling exactly this. They don't have anything but, let's say TCL, Roku, streaming, TV, 60 hertz panel. It's not even 120 hertz. If you go back to the TCL 6 series from 2019. So Joe, this is you, right, Joe?
Yeah.
Joe is reaching out to me and says, hey, you know, you got an extra OLED I could buy because I just want to watch TV, man. It's like
What
I
is
don't
this
need all
thing? Sony Master Series? What is this?
yeah, what
Maybe
is
that
this?
what I
Right?
need?
Like, I mean, we are in this echo chamber of HDR, like 1,000 nits, 1,500 nits. I don't, Joe even cares what a nit is, right? And Hisense and TCL is like, okay, people just want to watch what they want to watch and stream. And so it goes to what features are you overpaying for? I think if you're just watching TV, HDR, when people are talking about like 2000 nits or 1500 nits and HDMI 2.1, so much of that is very expensive just to get to that level of performance. And HDMI 2.1 should be standard, but it isn't. Like the Samsung, they reserve only one port of HDMI 2.1, making it like it's really precious. And you pay a bundle for that one port if you upgrade to that. But most people, they don't need HDMI 2.1. And so that's one feature I think that you could save money and not choose to go with. So if you get a Sony A8H that you love, Brian, you get what you get without overpaying, right?
Well, exactly. Well, to Jacob's point, and I'm definitely going to cover this in a video, is there is a misnomer where almost every panel out there now is good at gaming. As long as it has a good pixel response, its motion is okay. That's good for gaming. So I think we found that we have to try and separate it. You really don't. Why Hisense, Vizio, and TCL is they offer high-end specs in comparison to other manufacturers high-end, but they charge bargain prices, which is why you can get full array local dimming on TCL and Hisense, and where they're competing directly with Sony and Samsung's lowest end. And that's what makes them so valuable. But I still don't know how they're finding them, because at Costco and BJ's, they're not there. So it's just word of mouth, because they're still like the Vizio V series and the really lower ends, which don't even have the color gamut to show HDR, even though whether they're bright enough or not. But I feel like people, especially in our communities that we all have, they're so much more educated than the average consumer. And I think the average consumer still chooses Samsung or whatever's there.
Right.
But the community that we're all sharing, they're knowledgeable. They're the real customers that take where they want the information. They just go purchase.
I think you have another good segue there, Brian, is Samsung. So why do they buy Samsung? And it's a good point that you mentioned Samsung, because ultimately Samsung is the world's largest TV seller by both volume and revenue. I mean, these guys are huge.
By
they
a lot.
sell a lot. They're the number one seller in terms of what we talk about is expensive TV. So if you're paying for an 85-inch TV or 80-inch TV, they sell 50% of those in the world. If you're paying for TVs over 2,000, over 1,500, and they're not OLED, it's a Samsung. And that goes to what they're doing right now. So AV Forums launched the whole Samsung review season, right? They were the first to get their hands on a QN90A, and the early reviews were that it was very good. Blooming was controlled. They looked at the QN90A and the QN900, and also John Archer of Forbes has an early review sample. He wrote it up. He felt it was very good. Definitely an improvement over the Q90T, which isn't hard. As we all know, the Q90T only has just barely over 100 dimming zones. And Joe, dimming zones is what determines how well a TV performs in the dark. So 100 dimming zones is barely adequate. And so this year,
I do get to talk to Chana all the time, so like I'm pretty knowledgeable. You know, I have to talk to him, and he tells me about all this stuff all the time. So I'm pretty, I would say, intermediate. You know,
okay,
not beginner. Right. Like if you quiz me on something, I might know the answer to it, kind of deal.
Well, good thing, Joe, is by having a projector, you're not worried about screen uniformity. Right. You're just enjoying a good image.
Yep. You know, something you said, Brian, is interesting, because you talked about influencers, you talked about word of mouth. And to me, you know, I know the title was something about influencer, right? And I don't really consider myself an influencer. To me, this whole platform, social media, all it is word of mouth on steroids. It just gives you leverage to be able to, you know, anybody can turn on a camera and start a YouTube channel, right? So it's nothing special, you know. Anybody can really do it. But it's just that. To me, it's just word of mouth, right? So if you trust somebody, you hear what they have to say, then you may be influenced by what
Right.
they tell you, right? It's not
And
that our job is to influence people.
so
Of
it's a
course.
good point you say word of mouth, because Twitter is word of mouth, literally, right? If you find something interesting, the fastest way to share it to your friends is on Twitter or Facebook. So if you find a review and you know your friend is looking for a TV, you may share that review. And it doesn't have to be a YouTube review. It could be an online forum or whatnot, because that kind of takes us to what we're seeing right now is this disparity between what big press reviews are saying about the Samsung QN90A. So the Samsung QN90A, Joe, is the flagship 4K TV of Samsung. It's about $2,600, $2,700 for a 65-inch, and a 55-inch is like just over 2,000, something like that. And it's a mixed bag, right? Some people are saying it's great. So the German publication had their hands on it first, and they loved it. They said, "Oh my God, this is like the best Samsung ever." And Forbes said the same thing. But then the people that actually got it, be the installer, you had him like as a guest on, had it. Quantum TV has it, and they're like, "Well, it's meh." I mean, it's better, but it's not mind blowing. And so, where is the truth to that? Because now consumers are doing their own research. They're going to come on YouTube. They're going to ask you, Brian, because I know they have a very personal relationship. They're going to say, "Brian, what do I make of this disparity? If I go to the AV forums where they looked at it, if I look at Forbes and the German publication, this is the best Samsung ever." But then be the installer or other YouTubers are saying, not
Do people
really.
really look at Forbes though? Like, because that's the same thing with audio. Like the audio people reach out to like Forbes and like these magazines that they think they can reach a wide demographic. But like, does that guy really know? Like, it's almost like sometimes they just rehash what the press release says, right? And
But when you're
so
well, that's okay. So Brian, and why don't we start with you, because you get this question a lot, and then maybe Joe, you could share with us what you see in the audio space, because it's
Yeah.
the same thing.
Well, with Samsung and the large publications, albeit Forbes and a lot of those articles, their reviews are really surface. A lot of time talking about the bezel, the clean look. They might throw a nit here and there, but a lot of times it sounds like a commercial. It's a lot of fabulous, wonderful, but it does sound like it's marketing. They don't really get into like a comprehensive breakdown like you would see on ratings.com, where they're going into contrast ratio. And the reason is I hear those reviews so much earlier than actual releases. They just sound, and I've read them every year on every panel, and they differ so much from what user reviews are, or what, smaller YouTube channels. And YouTube channels are tough too, because you never know if there's an agenda there. You can get more views by saying something is terrible as well. So it's all
That is
about
true.
trying to trust too. Forums are difficult because it's faceless and you have people sharing. So it's about that aggregate of grabbing every opinion you can. And then and what we do is also break down not just what we see, but what we hear. And it's like we've all become little reporters on it, so I would never pre-order a TV, especially a first generation, something like the mini LEDs. It's all promise. I want to see it for myself. And I don't know, it's just a hard call, because we have more. It used to be just magazine reviews, especially Joe back in the audio side. It was a lot of catalogs and different magazines. Now I would not trust anything written from a large publication, especially if I don't see it in the store, which again is what we're talking about. Eventually I won't be able to do that.
I was actually in a LG TV ad, and it wasn't played here. So I was at CES 2020 because LG invited me out, because I've reviewed like sound bars and stuff from them, and I didn't even give them great reviews. So I'm kind of curious as to why they still, I didn't give them a great review, and then they sent me some cookies. One that was like a happy face, and they're like, "That's when I give a good review," and one when I'm like look grumpy because I've given them bad reviews. But anyways,
Oh, nice.
I'm like, that was kind of cool. But yeah, we're invited out there. It's just very weird when it comes to what you're saying, right? Like, audio is the same thing, right? There's people who just repeat what the press release says. That's not a review, right?
No.
It has nothing to do with the reviewing.
So here's something that I think Brian and I are lucky. it's easy to find a TV, look with our eyes, and to a certain degree, I think measurements on YouTube when it comes to TVs is closer to reality, right? Blooming, nits, and the like. But audio, how do you buy audio if you can't hear it? I think audio is even more difficult to buy virtually. There's even more confusion. I'd rather buy a TV the way we have it now, YouTubers or forums, and walk into Best Buy. How do you do the same in audio, whether it's speakers, AVR, DACs? What is it you recommend, Joe?
Yeah, so that's very interesting because there's a lot that you can measure when it comes to audio. The difference being that audio is something that you cannot see. It's perceivable, but it's not visual, right? Visual is the number one thing for humans, right? If you can see it, you believe it, right? But audio you can't really see unless it's graphed, things like that. The thing is that there are lots of measurements that you can look at that will tell you a lot about the speaker and how something is going to sound, right? It's just that maybe we haven't done a good job of communicating that and teaching people how to look at those graphs and what they mean and how they correlate to your preferences, things like that, how it operates in your room. And so that's really the tricky thing is, just trying to educate people on that. And the danger before was that it got real subjective, as if those objective like measurements didn't matter, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a combination, like measure what you can measure, right? And for certain things that you can't measure, like aesthetics, do you like the way the speaker looks? Well, how do you measure that? I don't know, right? We're gonna vote on that. Like, it's just what you like, right? Do you prefer the way this thing sounds, even if it's not flat? Okay, well, that's preference, right? But that doesn't mean that we have to throw away the measurements and the objective data. Just know that there's two, right? There's objective stuff and then there's subjective stuff. But try to get as much objective as possible, right?
And I think at some point I'll have to talk to you about the Harman curve that was voted to be the most pleasurable. But we'll save that until the end.
We'll talk about that, yeah.
And this is, I think, a timely question. James is asking about cinemas going out. Samsung says people want bigger and bigger screens. When we'll see 120 inches. So we are seeing 100 inches this year.
Why would you want that?
And that's another issue. So Brian has had lots of problems with large size screens. The size itself isn't the issue, but quality control. Brian, take it away. I don't want to steal your thunder.
With Joe, and we talk about projectors, is the screen uniformity on any TV over 65 inches. It's like 50% chance of it being defective. So whenever I see these prototypes of, like right now, my CX, my 77-inch CX, they're trying to find me a clean panel. They're having a challenge doing that. So it's when you're talking about, it's as simple as things are visual or the defects are more prominent. They're in front of you. But when you're talking about 100 inches of glass and plastic and just space, it's so obvious. The uniformity issues are just right there. Where a projector, it would just project onto the screen. I would not know why you'd want to go over 85 inches. There's just too many variables from it shipping to you, weighing 200 pounds, structurally, but just how it projects on screen, the pixels, the way they bend, they're just not meant to be that large. Just not. I mean, it's just, so I would not, if I get over 85 inches, I'll be into a projector, which I already have one, but that's what I'll be looking at.
And I want to comment on that because it makes complete sense in a business decision wise. And let's talk about statistically and yields. On a 100-inch panel, if there's one bad spot on the panel, you got to get rid of the whole panel or you sell it. On two smaller panels, well, if you have one bad spot, it's just one panel that's bad. You can still sell the other panel from the same mother glass. So when you have a larger panel, you don't want it to go to waste. You will let more bad panels pass. Otherwise, you can't sell it. You're throwing away too many possible panels that would be sold. So exactly. If you have the same number of issues across manufacturing, the larger panel will always have more issues because statistically, that's just how it is. It's a larger panel. You can't cut it in half and get rid of half of it like in a smaller panel, right? So to the point, you guys, if you are looking at anything over, 80 inches, 75 inches. What is your sweet spot, Brian, that they should look at a projector? And at this point, it's not even cost. It's the headache of getting a replacement or warranty.
Well, I'll tell you that going from a 77-inch CX to my 55-inch CX, a lot of the flaws, even the issues in the whites and the banding, they were still present at the 55-inch. They were still present at the 49-inch A9S Master Series. You just couldn't see them, whether it's pixel density or size. But when you have something engulfing you, it's just that much more obvious. And you can't hide DSC and vertical banding. And, you know, with Samsung, I had several panels. It didn't matter how much they cost. The more expensive, the worse they were. And I think that's more to do with how bright panels are now. If they were only 400 nits, you wouldn't really notice it. But they're thin, they're bright. It's just, they're just so obvious. 65 inches is where you start to notice them, but 75 and up is where you start to really see screen uniformity issues due to size.
And that, I think, goes to what I'm thinking. Sony's 100-inch may end up being a two-edged sword. On the one hand, it's exciting. It gets people excited and they'll buy it up, right? Because there's such a small inventory. It's USA exclusive only. So anyone outside the US wanting to get a 100-inch Sony A90J cannot. But then those who are getting it, I'd be curious to see what's the quality control like. Is Sony taking a more hands-on approach to inspecting these things? And now, generally speaking, Sony consistently has better uniformity overall, but this is a 100-inch screen. So it may be completely different for those. So those of you out there who are looking at the Sony 100-inch, get it, let us know, complain, come on our channel, complain to Brian. He's there for you. He has a tech therapy channel. That's what he wants to hear, right?
You know,
but at that size,
I have a 100-inch projector screen. I have a couple projector screens, but I have one that kind of like rolls up. You know, it's like one of those ones that's like motorized. And that thing is still like 9 feet wide or something crazy. Like I need to find a wall where I can fit that thing. You know, so I could only imagine, even if it was like something that rolled up, that's still huge. Like I don't know if people understand how much. I think that's the thing is like I don't know if people understand how much huger it is once you go from like 65 to my projector here is like 106 or something like that. 110, right? That's a big difference in size. It's not just like twice as big.
So I want to address what you just said and what Brian said about not just the uniformity on a technical side, meaning that there are actual physical defects. Also, the larger screen makes every uniformity issue, every issue more visible. So we're talking about motion stutter is worse on a larger screen. Anything that has nothing to do with your TV's defect is worse on a larger screen than on a smaller screen. And this is why the movie industry does not want to leave 24p. All of their grading, motion, everything is built for a certain size and a certain brightness and a certain motion. The minute they change one of that, you're going to start complaining. Like, oh my God, why does it look so terrible? It's not because they like 24p. It's because the brightness is built for 24p. If you go brighter, you might have to change the motion, which changes their entire workflow. So everything is linked up when you're at that, 250-inch size, whatever, 300-inch size. So when you have a TV going from a 55-inch to an 85-inch to a 100-inch, all the flaws that would be not noticeable on a normal TV, same model, will be possibly unbearable at 100 inches. And that would include artifacts, right? You and I talk about this, Brian. Motion processing, soap opera is fine. It's the artifacts around it. Well, that's going to be really visible at 100 inches.
Well, especially when you talk about 2K upscales, or as the comment that was just up there, things like checkerboard rendering on the PS4 Pro. You mix that with color gradients issues, and you mix that with other issues. Now and I recommend this with the things I'm talking about with banding. Don't go looking for them. If you're not sensitive to it, don't start looking. And I think like motion blur, some people are not sensitive to it. You know, even with speakers, Joe, some people aren't sensitive to certain sounds. So when I'm telling you about screen uniformity, if you don't notice it, don't go looking for it. But once it's there, it's it's hard to ignore. But there are other things at play. You have the gradients, how the film was mastered, how the game was. It can create a mess on some TVs, and again, larger TVs. My point is, after a certain size, it's going to be hard to ignore.
So you can't
And-
unsee some of those things, huh?
Oh,
No.
Brian, you
Dude.
can't unsee them.
it's just like
It's
this.
it's funny because like I just got like this like just randomly just for viewing this Samsung tablet, right? And it has an OLED, right? That's the reason I got this thing, right? And so sometimes I watch like late at night in bed, and I didn't care about a TV at all, right? Because I have my projector setups, and so like I'm watching and I'm here, I'm like, oh man, I don't see the black bars. This thing's pretty cool. I wouldn't mind a TV that kind of had the same situation in the bedroom. You know what I mean?
Well, so projectors, you're lucky there are no black bars.
Yeah. So anyway, I just like you're saying, you can't unsee. Now when I see the other TV, I'm like, man, that doesn't look so good.
Yeah, and I mean, screen size again. Look at your phones. And they're a different kind of OLED panel with the phones that we have, but they appear flawless. You don't see any banding on your phone unless it's burned in. But the size, monitors seem like they're better screen uniform because they're tiny.
Right.
And it's just that the larger it gets, again, other than just the image, it's the manufacturing. It's warped. It's if you've ever seen a large OLED over 7, a lot of times they're bent. It's just
Really?
Then we get into panel lottery with not just the manufacturer, with your delivery.
Oh man.
So it can get, and like you said, Joe, with sound, you're not seeing it. So you're like, okay, I like that or I don't like that. TVs, because they're the only visual appliance, it's endless. Is that a dead pixel? Some companies, 11 pixels, dead pixels is allowed. So that's why TVs are such an issue.
Yeah. By the way,
Thank
FOMO,
you,
I
Babes.
like 24p.
Nothing wrong with it. If you
I
have
shoot in
good motion
24.
processing, it's not a problem. Now, before we end, I definitely want to ask Whisper Status, Brian, about what you posted yesterday. And I agree with you. I believe there may be a shortage in some of or maybe all of them, TVs that are being manufactured for 2021. There appears to be issues at the production line. And this is affecting you too, Joe. We're talking about the fire at AKM, right? You heard about that?
Yep.
The Asahi Kasei fire. All the DACs, there are no digital analog converters from AKM anymore. You got to find different suppliers, but that affects TVs because TVs use DACs as well. What are you hearing for the viewers that missed it? And if you guys, I'm going to link it below. Watch Whisper Status. Brian does a great job talking to his friends about these shortages. But go ahead and share with us what you found out about these issues with very popular TVs coming out this year.
Well, it's interesting because, again, in our comments, you'll hear, this Q90, the OLED from Sony, is already available at certain Best Buys, and it's already on display. And then other parts of the country can't get them. So if you look at somebody like Robert Zahn from Value Electronics, who we're all friends with, he has typically the lion's share in the area of, being a diamond retailer. He has relationships with them. He's able to ship to his customers, but wasn't able to get them in store, all depending on where the distributor was located. So yes, when I say there's a shortage, someone in the comments will say, oh, I already have this. Yeah, you may, but it all depends on where you're located, if that distributor got it before you did. But what we're going to see this year is the true cost of what happened last year in the pandemic. Is when we really struggled with TVs last year, it was logistic. They were already made. It was getting them to us. The panels that we're missing now, they're still being put together and shipped, which scares me for panel uniformity and problems. But now we're starting to see, almost like the PS5, some places are getting 5, some are getting 25, some are getting none. So what I'm hearing from installers and also from Robert is, Shane from Spare Change and I were going to go film the OLED hands-on. It was pushed back 3 times, but he was still able to ship to his customers. So when people see my video, they're like, dude, that's not true. This guy has it. It still is true. You still can't walk in and purchase it. And Sony's also not allowing certain Best Buys to display them. So it's kind of like the consoles, where some people have 3 of them and other parts of the country can't get any. And that's New York, New Jersey. So it's not like it's very random. But you're going to start seeing, and this is going to be the same issue as the consoles. If you have an issue with it, good luck getting a replacement.
Yeah, no, agreed.
I just can't recommend buying and just pre-ordering. If you do, good luck. But I wouldn't. But it's and you said that with the mini LEDs. I have not seen them in person, so I can therefore not recommend them yet. But you're going to see shortages.
Now, Cabes has a great question. I think this is something that's down your alley. I have the C10. I don't have the A8H, so I know the C10 works very well. However, I do know Sony color is amazing. It's my preference. If he likes the A8H because he loves it on movies, what's your impression of the A8H as a PS5 gaming machine?
So, Cabes, and I am going to do a video on this. Your panel is capable of 4K 60 or if it was the A8H, for example, instant pixel response. That panel is fantastic for gaming. We have this misnomer now because of the CX having HDMI 2.1. All of a sudden, every panel that doesn't have it isn't good for gaming. The A8H is excellent for gaming. It's got a good input lag. It's absolutely gorgeous. So you're going to be topped out at 4K 60, which is phenomenal. Many of you haven't even experienced 4K 60 yet, and you'll be fine. So I would choose whatever one always looks the best, then go for performance.
All right.
And the CX is amazing. So were the Samsungs for gaming, but I think a lot of other panels from last year are being left out, namely the 950H, the A8H, the A9G, because people think, well, they don't have HDMI 2.1. You'll be fine as long as the pixel response is fast. You'll have a great experience. So to his question, whatever one you think looks best is the one I would go for.
I agree with you. Right on. Now, 2021, let's say 2021 TVs.
Hey, Scott.
You're sick of 2020. The year gives you bad memories. You want to go 2021. Do you have any TV that you're committed to, Brian? I know you haven't seen them yet, and this is pure speculation, guys. None of us has seen a 2021 TV. So Brian and I are free to change our minds once we see it. On paper, which one you take home? I think that'd be the better question.
It's hard. I mean, because there's some of us that feel like the C1s, there's a slight chance they might be a step back.
Really? Tell me what is it you're hearing?
It just, because of where they are in the lineup. C was always just below but the separation from Evo. And here's what I mean by step back. If they release and they're exactly the same and they're more expensive, that's a step back.
Right.
So the C9,
we know they're going to be cheaper. So we know they're going to be cheaper than the C10 MSRP. So at least you have that.
Exactly. So I know people think being cheaper is a bargain. It's not. 4K is being phased out. 8K is more expensive. So yes, we feel like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's cheaper. Yes, it's cheaper. But think about where 4K is. It's still great. But I have a hard time, even with the A90J. I want to see if there's any raised blacks. I want to see what the peak brightness actually is. So it's hard. I can't recommend the TCL 8Ks yet. I don't know what their processing is going to be. So unfortunately, right now, I really can't. It's hard to. I would say the C1 is probably the safest bet. The 950J will be very similar to last year's panel.
What I'm going to say, Brian, and I think you just raised an amazing point. I don't think people realize the G1 is technically what the C1 should be. This is what Samsung did, right? Is instead of giving an raising that model, they're just going to call it a higher end. The G1 is the natural evolution of what the C1 should be. But instead of doing that, they make it exclusive to the G1. And now the C1 is like a B1. And then you have a B1 and an A1. So you have a bunch of smaller mid-tier. I mean, they're just cutting it down. But the G1 is just a little bit brighter. That's it. Should not be the evolution of the C1, right?
No, well, so why would I buy?
You walked it back.
Why would I buy an 83-inch C1 when there's an 83-inch A90J, which is much brighter?
Absolutely.
And then why would I buy a smaller G1, which isn't as bright as the A90J?
And that kind of takes us to this question. A90J all day long. I mean, and I haven't even seen it, but based on what we know about the specs, the technology, it is so far ahead of, in my opinion, the QN900A. It's the fact that the QN900A is an 8K TV, you have to add additional technology to make it as good as a 4K TV. 8K pixels density is greater. That means it has to be brighter. You have to deal with other issues unrelated to image quality. You just have to get over that 8K barrier of physics in order to make it look as good as 4K before you exceed 4K. And not a lot of people realize that, but if you watch the reviews where people have both, you'll see that they go, wait, how come the 4K looks better than the 8K? And that's why it's an issue to me.
So we did a video recently on 4K being phased out. Having the Q900R in-house and comparing that to the CX, the 8K image, while tried to be sharper, the upscaling, the false pixels of upscaling created a more noisy image. So yes, while the trees and parts of certain games tried to be sharper, they were just noisier because it wasn't native 8K. And I think people take upscaling to be this magic. It's not. Upscaling will never look as good as a native image. A 1080p plasma showing 1080p footage will look better than a 4K display up converting 1080p. So 8K is just that again. And I think people are buying, as you know, we talk about with Joe, with what people say they want, you know, they just go for, instead of going by what Joe would say back in the day with speakers, they want 8K just because it's a higher number.
Yeah.
And that's what people are chasing.
Back to that previous question, FOMO, you know, just so I can be the dumb guy in the room, what are those model numbers? Like what is the...
Yeah, I know. Why can't they make it easy to remember, like a Mustang or something?
Like, right? I don't know what the difference is between those two. And the reason I ask is because, you know I'm not the TV guy, but I'm just wondering if any other people here may also have a similar question. Like,
so real quick,
what is the A90J and what's a QN900A?
So FOMO, if I can jump in, Joe. So when you walk into Best Buy, especially with Samsung, they will scatter around last year's models. And to be honest, the TV I have downstairs is the Q900R. Why do you have a Q900A? At least Sony is going by the alphabet.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it is confusion, and I think some of it might be it might be on purpose, is to just sell whatever year someone's there to pick up. But I don't know where they come up with these numbers. But it's confusing for even us when we're in Costco. It's hard to tell what year anything is.
I guess it sounded like you knew exactly what those specific ones are, and I'm not sure
it took a while, Joe. Every year they make up these crazy model numbers that have no bearing with what you're buying. It's so random. But
it's funny because I went to Best Buy with Chana, right? We have a video together where we walk into Best Buy and just kind of like start looking at TVs, and like he's like, "You see all these TVs right here by the door? You probably don't want any of these. Let's go back there."
And someone was asking about G-Sync compatibility. Just real quick. So G-Sync compatibility means that the TV was certified by NVIDIA to work with their cards, but it's essentially a VRR forum. It's forum VRR anyway. You can force your NVIDIA card to accept any VRR capable TV. It may or may not work. With the G-Sync compatible, it definitely will work, and only LG so far has had that G-Sync compatibility. I don't believe Samsung has it, right? I haven't seen Samsung promote that. They promised it. I haven't seen it, right? Yeah. And Sony definitely does not. Sony only has VRR. It doesn't even have FreeSync. So LG, that's why we say LG has the most comprehensive gaming feature. They have G-Sync compatibility. It actually works. People game with it on their PCs, and FreeSync works, and VRR works. So, but as far as the naming, Joe, Samsung this year added a whole layer of technology that they're reserving for the top end, and they separate that by the letter N, QN. So N means Neo QLED, and every year I have to memorize a whole new set.
It's a nightmare.
Specs, man. It's a nightmare. Let's see here. The pricing I have, what are leaked pricing, but it may change because of the shortages we're talking about. Sony is free to change the pricing at the end of the day, actually, because these were leaks but then if the shortages become a thing, they may actually go up a little. I believe I did post it, but I'll get to you later and tell you what it is. But there's a link on avforums.com. They, on one of their Sony forums, they posted all the prices for all the 2021 TVs. And I don't remember what the A80J is, but catch me later and we'll get it. Okay, now. Oh, hey, how much time do I have you guys for? I don't want you guys to hold you guys if you guys got to go or anything like that, because I know we're getting close to the hour, and you guys have been so patient with me.
Don't
good.
try me. I could talk all day, bro.
Huh. Well, one of the things that we wanted to talk about also is, well, and I never got your answer, Joe, is the shortages on the hi-fi space. So AVR, home theater, you know, you're doing reviews on the audio side of the home theater experience. What are you seeing in terms of those equipment, devices, and the like?
I think you mentioned that the fire at AKM did have an effect because a lot of devices were using them. I think COVID, of course, had an effect on what was happening. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of this stuff is being made in China, overseas, and you know, so a lot of manufacturers actually told me like, hey, you know, we're not doing, so I do the Hi-Fi Summit. We're not doing anything right now because we don't have products. Like, so I don't know what was causing what, basically. I just know that there was some issues with production.
Well,
and I think that's all kind of being relieved now, from my understanding, on new products. It sounds like they're saying that they don't have any issues right now. It was more something that was happening before.
Was it on Youth Man's channel? I think he posted an Anthem announcement that they're delayed in releasing their ARC, the room correction system, and they have production issues. So there's going to be a lot of patience asked of people waiting for their all new 2021 receivers and pre-pros, right? On the Anthem. Well, I mean, that's just Anthem. I don't know about the other guys.
I'm not sure if that has to do with the AKM stuff or not.
Yeah, we don't know, right?
Yeah, it might actually. I'm not sure.
Well, actually, their top end is supposed to carry the new AKM or one of the AKM chips, their most expensive pre-pro, I think. I forgot. Yeah.
So that's kind of the thing, and sometimes it just might be the company's not making a lot, right? It could be one of those things too. So you never know exactly what it is. It could be part of a, you know, I did a whole thing about how Apple, you know, they ran out of stock on their AirPods Max. I'm like, come on, this is like the richest company in the world. They can afford to make whatever they want. Is it part of a strategy at that point, right? It could be that too, and it's hard to tell. You don't really know, I guess, unless you're looking at the back end and seeing what's going on in production.
Yeah, they never tell you. And actually, they probably don't want to tell you. The minute it gets on the YouTube, people start making stuff up and then it goes crazy. As far as the A90J, we don't even know when it's going to be released in full scale. So if there's going to be an inventory constraint throughout the year, I don't think you're going to see huge price drops. What do you think, Brian, on the A90J?
I mean, there's already a constraint. So what we're seeing is they're not, well, kind of like what happened with the C9 and the CX. When we had our whole debacle of 48 gigabytes per second, the C9 stopped dropping in price. And so they are strategically realizing if there's no need to lower the price, they won't. So you're seeing that, you know, LG is not releasing the price of their 83-inch because Sony isn't. But if they're not releasing the price, how are you supposed to purchase it? So it ends up being this hurry up and wait, but do you pre-order? Or how do you buy? So it's going to be terrible because people are home. They want to enjoy their stuff. And so I'm pushing people back to last year for a lot of proven products. You know, the problem is with the HDMI 2.1 issue, they're not wanting to go back. They can't go forward. And it's tough for them.
Man, I'm getting influenced. I want an OLED too. What's up, Robert? What's going on over there? How you doing?
Quick question was LG C10, Brian. Do you have issues if the C10 is placed next to a window on the right? Have you ever done that? Is it too bright? Is there a glare problem if a window is to the right of a C10?
Oh, as far as what it's reflection handling?
Yeah, reflection handling, bright room.
It's decent. It's not the very best. I mean, Samsung is the best for that, but it's equal to any other OLED. I mean, to me, they're bright enough. But
Right.
if you're going to be in a bright room all the time, they're not the best choice. Or
And
any
yes,
OLED's not the best choice.
yeah. Which, and the reverse is true. OLEDs, if you wanted to shine, if you spent good money on an OLED, spend a little bit more to turn off the lights and put it in a dark room. That's when
some
you get
curtains up.
100% out of your OLED, right? It's like buying a Porsche or Ferrari and never taking it to the track at least once. You don't know what your OLED is capable of unless it's in a dark room. What's the head shaking? Come on, Joe. What do you want
No,
to say?
you're saying the people who don't take their car to the track. Because when I had my M3, I took it to the track because that's where you're supposed to take it. These people.
At least once,
Come on,
right?
man.
At
Take
least
it to the track.
I tried to take my Miata to the track, and I couldn't get in. It was closed.
I couldn't fit in
You
one.
have a
So
Miata?
I learned how to drive stick on a Miata. So I bought a Miata.
I
I
thought
didn't
that
know
was
how to
for
drive
chicks.
stick. No, get this. I didn't know how to drive stick, and I spent a month at a video game arcade learning to drive stick on their most difficult arcade game with a stick shift and a clutch. And then I go to the dealership. I buy the Miata. It took me almost 30 minutes to get out of the lot. I kept on driving around the block.
Yeah.
And then when I stopped stalling, then I took it home. And I tell you, man, it was hair raising.
That's hilarious, man. I bought a car before that was stick and not knowing how to drive stick, but I figured it out, on the way out.
Yeah, on
you
the
just
way
gotta
out,
pretend
right?
like you know.
Oh yeah,
That's all you need. But yeah, all about S2000, I think, over Miata. By the way, sorry.
Mine was a 2000, circa 2000, 2001. Top 10 old 4K TVs worth buying today. I think, Brian, this is up your alley. You know more about the older TVs than I do. I can only go back 2 years. H9F, H9G, and I don't know if they're old. What are you thinking as old?
Well, if you're asking me about what old TVs to buy, the challenge is I wouldn't buy them because you're not getting them from. So some people have asked me, "Hey, I have a Q9FN for sale from this website." I can't recommend buying those. Joe,
I have a teacher. I have a question.
Yes.
So how much difference has I guess how to say, how much has OLED technology advanced over the years? Like if from an older OLED, like just the panel itself, not so much the processing, but just the panel itself, is there a lot of advancement over the past few years?
not since the C8 for 3 years ago.
And the C8 helped solve the burn-in problem, right? They added a few algorithms. I think the biggest improvement has to be this year when for the first time you got 3 companies break 1,000 nits, and that's the brightness. That is quite amazing. You got Sony and Panasonic, or just 2. Sony and Panasonic breaking 1,000 nits.
Well, Panasonic had done it a few years ago with
2 years. Yep.
The heat sink.
Right.
But
The heat sink.
to your point, Joe, OLEDs have not changed for me since the C8. So to me, the C8 was actually brighter than the C9, and I had a B8 and it was much more vibrant. So so there's no guarantee. To me, it's hit a wall other than now them being brighter. So with a new layer, and they've tried to conquer it. But to your question, LEDs to me have gone backwards from where they were in 2016, 2017. I think due to manufacturing costs, zones are expensive. The panels were thick. So TVs, to that first question, you're talking about Q9FN, Z9D. I don't know. After that, things tend to taper off. It's hard to recommend going backwards. 930E, 900E. So the processing has improved, but it's hard to recommend you guys go backwards because you're not buying from a reputable dealer, and there's going to be issues, and the manufacturer will not cover them.
Yep. And burn-in is not a thing if you don't abuse it. And abuse is if you play video games that have the persistent static logos or watch CNN all day. If you watch movies, streaming, and occasionally sports, you're okay. If you watch something with a sports ticker all day long, you are at risk for burn-in, even with what they have now. What are your thoughts on burn-in, Brian?
So for me, a simple exercise with burn-in, if you're worried about it, varying content is the way to go. Switching up your content. If you can't, and you're somebody that games all day on the same game, A simple exercise that I do every time I play is I have a YouTube playlist of my favorite demos that are full screen. As I'm shutting down my system, I run that for 3 or 4 minutes, and that just gets the pixels moving off that same static HUD, whether it's whatever game you play, and you'll be fine. I've had no issues with OLEDs the last few years, and I've gained on them very hard. But like anything else high-end, albeit vehicles, you have to take a little extra care. If you like to sleep with your TV on and run it constantly, I just wouldn't recommend them. Just in general, because some people like to run that same ticker, that will eventually have an issue.
Yeah. And Chris Anudi, good question. A lot of people will wonder, hey, A90J, Evo G1, money is not no object. I just want something that fits what I want. So it's completely two different use cases. On the G1, you're paying for a very nice looking TV. It's called a gallery series. It comes with, you buy a tripod to show it off, but it's not going to be as bright as the A90J. And LG is not known for their cinema color science, not known for their motion. It's not bad, but you're paying extra for something that the G1 is designed to do, which is look good in your living room. Get the tripod right. The A90J 83 inches meant to be for movies. Like they went all out. They made it bright. They added a heat sink. The G1 doesn't have that heat sink. So if you need a bright TV, get that full HDR with very little tone mapping. It's the A90J. If you watch a lot of video games, right? If you want 4 HDMI 2.1 ports, you got yourself a PS5, Xbox Series X, and a PC. Only the G1, you could plug all 3 of them to a 2.1 port. The A90J, you can't. The G1 has G-Sync compatibility. A90J doesn't. So it's very different use cases. Yes, Joe.
All right, back the previous question, about the OLED burn-in. Like, what if you're just a baller? Like, what if because there's some people who just have money. They're like, you know what? I'm just gonna watch whatever I want. I'm not going to worry about it. Like, at what point, how many years or how many months until you start worrying about it? What if I'm like rich? I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to use one as my computer monitor because I'm rich. Like, you know what I mean? Like, of course there's going to be an issue, but at what point, like, how long do you think it'll take? Normal use.
There've been some experiments done, right? Normal use, never.
No, normal use, you'll be fine. But if you're talking about abusing it and you're a baller, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can use them as PC monitors. They'll kick in, they'll dim. You'd still be hard pressed to make it burn in. So there's a lot of. I'll give you an example. When I saw a serious burn in Best Buy, which was on one of their C9s, it was a short demo where the same image kept hitting every minute and a half, and they had those TVs on Vivid. And for all you guys that don't know, even your demos for Sony and OLEDs, they're all on Vivid. Even your OLEDs. Those TVs are also shut off, not at the display. They're shut off altogether. They don't get a chance to refresh. That's how they burn in. That home usage is rare. So yes, you can still abuse it. It still would take a while, in my opinion. Back in the day, they'd burn in pretty quickly. But since the C8, it's been much safer. You can beat them up.
All right, because I think that's kind of a misconception. I think maybe people overstate that or are overly worried about that. Maybe I'm just wondering if that's the case.
As far as them burning in.
Well, being a little bit, just too worried about it, where it's probably not going to be as much of an issue as they think. Right?
Of course. Well, I mean, but Plasma had that until the day they stopped manufacturing them. It was still something people were worried about, and it wasn't really an issue at the end, but it followed that to the end of its manufacturing. So OLED's the same way, and it's an easy way to kick OLED's legs out. Just like blooming's an easy way to kick out an LED. But back to the previous question, FOMO, with the A90J, people are very hung up on specs, which what you can relate to, Joe, as far as speakers. But now everybody is in love with what about 1400 nits versus, remember that very few instances are you going to see that. And people are they're not chasing contrast ratio. They're chasing specs, how many zones. It's really about how it looks on screen, which is why so many of us are apprehensive about, I can't recommend, I'll give you an example, the Vizio Quantum XP series, 3000 nits. The specs were off the charts. 700 zones, what we always wanted. The algorithm was an absolute mess. So when I was reviewing it, I had so much pushback. Well, dude, there's no way. It's got 700 zones. I'm like, I have it in front of me. It's not just about horsepower. If you can't implement it, if the car can't handle, it doesn't matter. So if you want to chase nits, but the TV can't handle it, it doesn't make a difference. If you want to chase watts, but the speaker can't handle it, it doesn't make any difference. But everyone that's asking me questions, they're asking me about specs. I want this one. I want that one. And when you're looking at OLEDs, it's about contrast ratio. So yes, I want peak brightness too, but I want to see how it's handled. So buy what you think is best, but don't chase nits. You're going to find when they're calibrated, they're not going to be 1400 nits. And if that 1400 nits is in vivid only, we don't watch OLEDs in vivid for the most part.
And so to that point, when I got my Q900TS, remember, Joe, my $5,500 8K 65-inch TV. So it was advertised as having 1800 peak brightness, and the calibrator goes, oh well, yeah, I got almost 1700 peak brightness, but that was on special, in a certain mode, on a special screen with its full stimulus. When you put it in movie mode, watching movies that should be brighter, it isn't. It could never break 1300 nits. I mean, that's just what it is. And Z Blackrider, real quick, monitor PC, if you have persistent logos, right? It's not the browser, it's all the little avatars and icons you have on your computer. So I don't recommend using an OLED for PC usage, like browsing. Now, a lot of people are using like new LG OLED that's coming out, 60 hertz, and it's like $4,000. And unless you're color grading and you need that color accuracy with deep blacks and OLED provides, and your whole screen is taken up by certain applications, I think that's an OLED burn in nightmare waiting to happen if you're using it just to do what people do. They have all these same apps open with the same exact logos everywhere, every day, 8 hours a day. I don't know why you would do that with an OLED unless you need it for professional use, because your company will replace it.
Well, so when people ask about PC monitor, you want it as a PC gaming monitor, then they're perfect. You want it as your monitor that you're going to leave on all day long. That's an expense. Monitors are $400. Buy yourself a monitor, but to have it be, your workflow monitor, you would want to hide your icons. You would want to do, you want to have it to turn off after a few minutes. But if you want to leave it on all day long, I wouldn't recommend doing it.
I want to be risky and just try it. Just be risky and just, you know what? Let me just use this as my main monitor. Let's see what happens.
You know what? The Vizio is the perfect monitor.
I use mine as a game monitor.
I should. I have the extended right now, warranty. FOMO. I'm coming by. I'm gonna do it. So that's a huge monitor, bro. I can't do that as a computer monitor.
I have to share this with you, Brian. It's funny. So Joe asked me, hey, you got a OLED you want to sell me? I go, yeah, I got this Vizio 55-inch, and it's got the extended warranty, right? And I could even transfer it over to you. It's a Geek Squad warranty. And then Joe starts doing his research, right?
I didn't even have to do a lot of research, man. Just a quick Reddit search is like, how come they can't make one that doesn't just turns on properly? I'm like, hold up a second. Right. Yeah, it doesn't turn on.
Right? Technodad's like, yeah, mine doesn't turn on anymore, or whatever, right? It powers off, powers off.
It's terrible.
It doesn't turn on. Little issues, but like the TV has to turn on. Like out of anything,
power is a hard one.
It doesn't keep the settings okay, but like it doesn't turn on.
I'm gonna review my Vizio. So I was going to review my Quantum P series, and I couldn't turn it on. And I was like, okay. During the video, it shut off, and I was like unplugging. I'm like, am I really unplugging and replugging? And eventually the power supply on it went during the review. So I was like, oh, okay. That's
which one was this again?
It's just, I would say if you're going to buy Vizio, the Quantum XP series. But I would say if you're buying anything Vizio, your Costco's, any place that gives you 90 days is the way to buy them.
That's absolutely it. Or get a Geek Squad warranty.
That's Vizio. I'm sorry.
I just don't want the hassle. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, even if I can take it back, I'm like, I don't want to have to go and take this thing back. Like, I just want it to just work. Like, I'll just pay extra and just if it works, then if it turns on, that's the challenge is after a certain period of time, once that return window is gone, and you're dealing with the manufacturer, especially Samsung, you're done.
Oh yeah,
Samsung will want to repair your panel, and I've had panels that are ridiculously priced. There is no special treatment. They're like, sorry. So you could be
And
stuck with a $10,000 paperweight.
so this person respects your opinion, Brian. Are you concerned the new brighter panels? Is that an issue? What are your thoughts?
I'm not concerned with burn-in. I'm concerned with raised blacks. I'm concerned with paying a premium for 1400 nits if I'm not going to see it a lot. I want to make sure that it can do peak brightness when I need it during HDR. I want to see them calibrated. I want to see Dolby Vision. Because here's my challenge. If I'm looking at a 77-inch CX or even an A9G, which is now, I think, $4,000, an 83-inch A90J will be about $8,000. That's 50% for a few inches.
Yep.
If you can joke about that, but you're paying for higher peak brightness. It's just a hard, and the cognitive processor, all that marketing. But I just can't. I have to be cautious because I'm paying an exorbitant amount. The G1 is not worth. I mean, if you look at even the GX from last year, it sits flush, but it's not wallpaper. So you're paying $2,000 more for something that aesthetically looks a little better. I'm pushing the A9G.
And a suggestion for Cabes and others in his position, this is what YouTubers are for, really, is we are the one that spend the money or get the products, and we're stuck with it, but it's a business write-off for us. So let us be the ones that deal with the issue. Let's say, oh, the G1 turns out to be not so bright, right? Or someone else looked at the QN90A. Wow, that's not as I had hoped. Their disappointment, not yours, right? And then as they get more and more TVs, like I hold on to all my TVs, unless like the Vizio, it actually stops working. I had to return it, but the Vizio OLED still works, so I still have it. I'm just trying to palm it off on Joe, but he won't take it now.
Last question. Last dumb question.
Uh-huh.
All right. So, I think for me, it's kind of hard to understand. I kind of know the answer just because I do camera stuff and I do like presets. So I do mess with colors a lot, things like that. But maybe to somebody else who might not understand is like why it seems like dark and brightness, right? So black levels and max brightness, they seem like the opposite ends of the same spectrum, right? Like it seems like if something's brighter, that's just as good as something being darker. And it's not really the case, right? That's not how our eyes work. Like, black levels are more important, right, than max brightness. I think that's the tricky thing. It seems like it's the same thing, equal.
So I will defer to my interview with Scott Wilkinson. You guys had him on at one time.
Yeah, Scotty.
Wilkinson, right?
Yeah.
So he is the veteran TV reviewer of like 40 years, 30 years. I mean, he's been doing TV reviews. And when I had him on, I asked him about black levels, and his response is that for TVs, black is the canvas. Like when you're painting, you paint on a white canvas. But on a TV, you have to start with the black. And then from there, you add color and light. And that's an OLED. With an LCD TV, you start with gray. And from there, you add whatever. But you can't get darker than gray. Now, recently with full array local dimming zones, they've been able to get it blacker. The problem is where the black meets the bright, there's that blooming. So that's not completely right. And that's even more distracting. So black is the standard for cinema watching, anything, gaming, HDR. It's more accurate, but you just can't get it bright enough because OLED cannot get it bright enough. But most people will accept it at 600 nits, 700 nits, like both Brian and I. We love our OLEDs in the dark. But in a bright room, suddenly that black is no longer important because the bright room washes out everything, including the black, right?
Yep.
So if you don't watch in a bright, if you're in a bright room, then OLED loses some of that impact. But in a dark room, you get the full dynamic range, all 650 nits without the ambient brightness that kind of dilutes all of that.
Well, and as you mentioned, bright is, I know some of my Samsungs even the Q900R, it washes it out. So like even IPS gaming monitors, they look so crisp, but if it's washed out, then that brightness is for nothing. At least in my opinion, I like the depth of even seeing the textures and weapons or rocks. Is the black level, it lives there as well, not just what we see on edges.
Apparently, Whisper Status still owes the Value Electronics store tour. Did you do that already? I forget if
I
you've
have
done the
not.
store tour.
No, well, the problem with Value Electronics is it's a good problem. They're so ridiculously busy.
Oh, that's
It's not a
awesome.
large store. I'm a large person. So when I'm in there leaning over equipment to shoot a video, and Joe, you'll appreciate this, their speakers and things that I'm leaning on to film cost 4 times as much as the TV that I'm filming. Like they have record players and all kinds of stuff around. So it's hard to shoot there without having, they have boxes. They're selling ridiculous amount of TVs. They also calibrate a lot of them. So whenever I'm filming, I'm around so many boxes. It's even hard to, I'm in the way. And I'm not there due to what's happened. I'm not there as often as I would like to be. Though they tell me the door is always open, I'm in the way, and they're on the phone constantly. Robert's hard to nail down.
Got to roll in with a GoPro or something small. You know what I mean? Just be like,
it's not the camera. I mean, it's me. I'm in the way. I'm leaning on them, but I'm leaning on speakers that cost so much more than the TV that I'm looking at. So, we were supposed to do the shootout that was canceled. So, you'll see us down there. My CX will be calibrated. We'll film that. I have Value Electronics when they find me one. But to what you guys had said before, I have the opportunity to purchase an A90J or the C1 instead of my CX. I still want the CX.
No, simply this because is really good process. Yeah, tell us about that.
Well, simply because value. I already know the CX inside and out. I know it's worth what I paid for it. I can't speak to, even with my relationship with Value Electronics, it's hard for me to say, grab me an A90J and here's another 4,000. I just don't, and being in this, being more seasoned, I don't think any TV is worth that anymore. Audio equipment there's no ceiling. I mean, speakers can cost, TVs, there is a ceiling, and speakers can last 20 years. TVs do not. They're not worth anything after 1 or 2 years.
I don't know. I've seen that Sony that they use for monitoring.
That's the monitor
pretty up there. Yeah, that's pretty up there.
The one they calibrate against.
Yep. What is it, like 30 Gs or something like that?
That's like grading for Hollywood. That's a monitor, but like TVs, it's just they come down in price and they're just not worth it anymore. But like audio equipment, speakers, receivers release every few years. You can keep your receiver, for a long time. I recently just got a new receiver, but the HDMI 2.1 on the Denon isn't really functioning properly. So other than that, I would have kept my receiver.
What kind of speakers you bumping? Just kind of off topic, but I'm just very curious.
They're old B&Ws, but they're old, but they're perfect. I mean, I've had them forever.
My first speakers.
You should change your name to Baller Status.
They're 74. They're old. I mean, they're like
Baller 74. Hey, this is a really good point that you bring up, though, because in the past, people are saying, hey, you know what? AVRs suck because you have to buy a new one every few years. They keep on adding features. I honestly think we're at the point of AVRs, Joe, where you could get a X3600H from Denon, and it's still as good as the 3700 this year and maybe next year, because I think Atmos is going to be around for at least a few more years. I don't see any new immersive. I mean, they just got started with Atmos. What are your thoughts on how long a receiver is going to last now?
It's funny because if you're rocking a projector, you don't have to worry about any of that, because we have like all the old school tech. Like our stuff doesn't have Dolby Vision, like, none of that. Like I just barely got a 4K projector. You know what I mean? I like what my receiver's doing. I'm using a NAD T778, and theirs is a modular system, so they can potentially just upgrade the video portion of it, and so the audio all kind of like that's cool. I like that. I think that's a good approach. I don't know that all companies are going to do that, but almost every time you upgrade for an AVR, it's good. It's mostly for video reasons, I think.
I think you bring up an excellent point. A lot of people don't realize, why aren't you using your TV as a switch, right, Brian? I mean, I use it as a switch. I don't want any video going through my AVR. I want my video go to TV, and that's what eARC is for. Now, in the past, before ARC or eARC, you had no choice. Now with eARC, send all your sources to your TV for video, and then the audio goes to and then the AVR talks to the TV with eARC, and you could lip sync it, right? and it's lossless. There is no reason to upgrade your AVR if it's video, if your TV is a one that has eARC functionality. And that's why Chana and I and Brian, like, you got to get it with eARC. I mean,
So that's the solution. I think you have the solution right there. Everything plugs into your TV, and then your one cable from your TV to your audio system, and that's it.
that's it.
I think they like selling new ones every year, though. But
But what are they adding, right? Like last year they added 8K, it didn't work. HDMI 2.1 didn't work. This year, or the 3800H, and they're freaking expensive. Each of these AVRs, like the 3700, right? It's over $1,000. Oh, you cannot buy one every year. Maybe every 10 years when it fails. It may not even fail in 10 years, right? And
yeah,
I don't see Atmos being replaced by a better Atmos anytime soon, because that's firmware upgradable, I think, if they add anything else. Yeah, I think we're in the golden age of AVRs where you could get it and hold on to it.
yep.
I think Brian is frozen out.
Oh.
He's like,
After I said baller status, he just
yeah, it's got the bad connection in Connecticut there. All right. I am going to 5 more minutes, guys. I'll look at questions. Any questions you have, ask. 5 minutes. And so I want to let everyone else go home and enjoy the rest of their weekend. Just real quick, I'm going to revisit the shortage for those of you. Oh, you're back. You're back. Hey. So just a real quick recap on my thoughts on the TV shortage and so forth. So for most people, unless you're spending over $1,500 and you're looking at these high-end features that's unique to the 2021 TVs, for example, Samsung's FreeSync Premium Pro. If you just want a TV that streams and sports and watches movies, and you're only a PS5 console gamer, I think 2020 TVs, the good ones, over $1,500 last year, now they're about $1,000 or close to it. Get the 2020 TV. Those are my thoughts. What about you, Brian and Joe? What is your budget for TV buying for people who are concerned that maybe they won't get their dream TV in 2021?
Go ahead. You go.
I agree.
I don't know, man. I just need to get.
I think I lost Brian again. Oh, I'll get.
Am I there?
So, Joe, why are you getting an OLED now? Just because I know you've been hitting me up on advice on OLED.
Yeah.
What are you looking at?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm reviewing this like Sonos Arc soundbar, right? And so I need to review the Arc portion, and projectors aren't really good with that sort of stuff. So they're slow to change. You know what I mean? So I'm like,
now you're looking at
least get something.
eARC or just Arc?
Well, if I'm gonna do it, I need
Lossless,
eARC, right? So that'd be better. But yeah, that's the main reason, and because I don't mind, like, you guys keep talking about OLED. This, you guys are influencing me, because you guys are influencers, to like, upgrade my
Joe,
setup.
My recommendation is get a B10 or a C10, whichever is cheaper, because crazy enough, I've seen C10s same price as B10 on discount and that's a 2020 model, because you're going to get some good deals on those. Now, I have a C10. You just have to wait until I'm done with it. My comparison. So if you can wait that long, I'll give you a call.
All right. There it is. Yeah.
There it is.
I just want to know what you guys are talking about. So I'm getting a taste of it with this tablet, these black levels. Oh, man. I'm sold.
All right. I think this is a good time to wrap up. Thank you so much for being here, guys. joentell. I'll link their channels here. Joe is Mr. Audio. He is very informative, educational, and I love his content. And every Monday you have a podcast as well, right? The Hi-Fi podcast.
Yeah, Daily Hi-Fi. I don't want to like
yeah,
it's right there.
And Brian, his channel is Whisper Status 74. He is the Tech Therapy channel, real tech for real people. And if you are stressed out about your TV buying experience, or if you just want someone to cry, a shoulder to cry on, that's Brian, right? So I'll list his channel as well. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you next time.